we laid out a way for him to essentially get 12 to 16 spaces with no additional consumption of space in that footprint. And he was able to pivot and add another 6 units
Really?
to that project. And he doubled the value.
Hello, and welcome to Mornings with Joel, commercial real estate podcast, where we focus on rising stars and established players in commercial real estate and talk to them about how they are building legacies in today's marketplace. Hello, welcome everyone to the Mornings with Joel CRE podcast. We're excited to have you with us today for another very exciting show. And we have something quite interesting that we're going to be going through today, and this is mechanical parking systems. And you might say, well, why is that such a big deal? Well, it is a big deal because you look at many urban areas, parking is a big deal, right? And also housing is a big deal. So how do we incorporate the two in order to bring value to the marketplace without pricing people out of the market and a lot of other things? So we're going to talk about that a little bit today. We have with us Sean Fitch, who happens to be the head of sales for KLAUS Multiparking. And Sean, how you doing today, man? Good to have you with us.
Doing well, doing well. Glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Fantastic. So, first of all, give us a little background. You're the national sales director, and you are of KLAUS Multi Parking. Why did you feel that this was such a great opportunity to work for this company and bring value to the marketplace?
Great question. Great question, Joel. I'll start with it's about 26 years I've been in construction primarily started in the tri-state region in New York City primarily, and very dense urban setting, and have been in that material design, architecture, and systems world space for the better part of that entire period. The latter part, the last 6 to 8 years, I've been really focused on bringing technologies to development that really are paradigm shifts and bring value and bring change, positive change, not just, kind of a rehash of an existing type of product set, but something that truly changes the value proposition and in many cases enables projects that, that wouldn't be feasible otherwise. And so that led me to mechanical parking. And I've been in that particular industry for about 7 years now, the last three and a half of which have been with KLAUS. And I'll tell you the reason I sought out, and I think it was a mutual seeking of each other. But the reason I sought out KLAUS was their history. This is a very important system. It's critical to the functioning, the functional aspects of the building. It's not something that, can be taken lightly with regard to, its reliability, longevity. All of that is absolute importance. And KLAUS is a 120-year-old business with over 60 years in mechanical parking.
Okay.
There's nobody else like it. And to me, that was important. I wanted to make sure that when I'm, really helping solve a problem, I'm not also creating a problem.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's why I'm here.
No, that's a good point. And KLAUS obviously hasn't been doing this for 60 years in the United States unless I've been living under a rock. So, and I'm from Manhattan, so I understand New York City. So where did this all begin? Because I
Ah,
understand that they're actually an overseas firm.
that's a great question. And you're right. You weren't living under a rock. It's not 60 years in the US. It's about 30.
Okay. Oh, that's
Uh,
long. That's a good time. Bit of time.
yeah, it's surprising, right? You
Yeah.
wouldn't, even 30 years, you'd think did I miss something? Was that happening 30 years ago? And probably you were then, but it became more noticeable the last 15 years, I'd say. But realistically, they've been installing mechanical systems, starting with a more, basic stacking
Hmm.
mechanism that 60 years ago in Germany. It was
Okay.
really a derivative of a need for the Olympics in Munich. What happened was big influx of people coming to a city and nowhere to put the cars.
Yeah.
How does the city deal with this? And multiple manufacturers were tasked with trying to figure this problem out, and KLAUS solved it. And those stackers are still alive and functioning today in Munich. And that's,
Wow.
60 years ago. Since then, KLAUS has installed nearly 1 million parking spaces globally.
Really?
Yeah, so we
Wow.
are, we're in virtually every corner of the globe. We have subsidiaries in Australia. We have dealers everywhere else in between. And they've been, successful in every market. Everywhere we go, we are definitely solving problems. Obviously, Europe is probably our most mature
Hmm.
market, especially Germany, is probably our most mature and most adopted and successful for using these types of systems. But it's growing elsewhere because I think once developers and municipalities in particular also they understand it and they understand how to apply it for maximum value, it's hard to not design with it.
Yeah. Let's
Yeah.
dive into that a little bit more because
Sure.
one of the things that I've noticed is developers generally parking is almost an after effect. It's like, what do I have to do, right, in order to get this parking in? So the city says
Yeah.
you got to build X amount of spaces per units or whatever the case is, especially if you're talking multifamily. What do you think would happen if we were to remove these parking regulations from the cities? What opportunities do you think that would open up? And would let me ask that a different way because I think there's a better way to ask that question. From a
Okay.
developer perspective, how do you think they could view value or create value from a parking system as opposed to just doing a I have to making it something that they want to do? Loaded
Excellent
question.
excellent reframing. And I would take it either way. I could answer that either way, but your reframing of it is, I think, particularly interesting because I think it's the way it should be really evaluated
Hmm.
from a developer's perspective is as an asset, a
Right.
benefit, as an amenity, if you will. What did we learn? What's one of the things we learned in COVID? We
Hmm.
learned that people love their cars and they will not get rid of their cars. I don't care how dense the city is.
Hmm.
I don't care how difficult and expensive it is to manage and maintain and have that vehicle. Most people will do everything they can to have that freedom and independence of a vehicle. If you are a developer in one of those areas and you want people, to see your project, your building
Hmm.
as a truly a higher grade, a better living opportunity, as simple as it is to bring water into their apartment, it is to give them parking. It's a basic human need for many people to be able to have that freedom, to have that independence. So if you have a building that offers them, a really no hassle, easy solution and gives them a parking space, you've got amenity above board.
Hmm.
You're above the average. So I think it should be viewed as a value added amenity. And I think that most people expect or would love to have parking available. It's probably one of the biggest fears, challenges of living in a densely populated urban environment. And if you can have a building that takes away that pain point, I think you're going to never have to worry about, having to fill any units. So I think that's how it should be looked at. However, it's not how we deal with it today. Today, we deal a lot with, fairly draconian code requirements and building, department planning and zoning board requirements for parking. And we're trying to help developers, really realize projects that would have been, essentially kiboshed by those requirements. We are helping them facilitate the projects at a very basic level of solving for, I need to have this many spaces. So that's where we enter it
Hmm.
today. But what I spoke about earlier, that I think is what happens when a developer and a municipality understand the value, they tend to have done it. They're protesting the first time. Do I
Hmm.
really have to? But oh, fine, I'll do it. I'll make the project.
Right.
I'll give you what you asked for, Mr. Municipality. And they do it. And then the next project may not even have the same parking requirement, but they do it again. And then they do it again. And they do it again. And they implement these systems on every project in a similar market that, similarly dense, similarly occupied by people that, like to have vehicles. They tend to use it over and over again because it does do other things. It promotes other value propositions within their project other than just satisfying a parking requirement.
Gotcha, gotcha. So let me ask this. I want to get this in before we go to our first break. Just for the sake of our audience, what exactly is KLAUS Multi-Parking System? I know what it is because of development projects that I'm involved in, but for
Sure.
your or for the purposes of our audience, what exactly is it? Because we kind of jumped in with the understanding that everybody knows what this is. Let's
Doesn't
explain it.
everybody? Doesn't everybody know? Isn't Klaus the Kleenex of
The
mechanical
years, right?
parking?
Everybody should know.
You should know. You should know. Real simple. Klaus is a designer and manufacturer of an engineering group that focuses solely and primarily on densification of parking, and that is in the form of mechanical parking. And that can be something as simple as maybe a lot of viewers have seen, a valet with a mechanical hydraulic lift. It can be as simple as that, virtually no intelligence, to the most premier side of our industry, which is kind of a virtual valet, where you pull up to a building in Manhattan and all there is a curb cut and a bay, and
Hmm.
cars literally, seemingly get sucked into a system and disappear. That would be kind of fully automated systems. And Klaus is a manufacturer of everything from that most simple to that most complex and everything in between. And yeah, there's examples of it all over both coasts and even in the middle of this country. So I encourage you to look and
Yeah,
find a Klaus installation near you.
gotcha. Got. I like that. How many installations would you say there are in the United States right now? Just ballpark.
Oh gosh,
Any idea?
ballpark. It's in the hundreds.
Okay,
Um,
okay.
it's in the
So
hundreds. I
the
don't know exactly
yeah,
how many,
the
but
reason I asked that is because many people think that this is still new technology.
oh
Like
gosh,
it just came around and nobody's really doing it because it doesn't work.
yeah.
And I want to kind of debunk that a little bit.
No, we
Yeah.
have been 30 plus years very strong in the Miami and Southern Florida markets and the West Coast in the Bay Area, 30 years of deep penetration into those markets, systems that are as old as that. And then in the Northeast in New York, New Jersey, I'd say the last 20 years, we've
Okay.
been developing projects here, but yeah, it's nothing new. It's decades in existence, and the last 10 years have been explosive growth. So
Yeah. Fantastic. So let's do this. We're going to take a quick and break for our sponsor, and then we will come right back.
How do you build a company that lasts? One with a solid foundation that gets better with time, transforming the first dollar in your bank account into something more, building a product, a team, a culture, expanding to new countries, currencies, and customers, and accessing the capital you need to grow. How do you do all of that? With powerfully smooth banking that keeps you focused on bringing your vision to life.
Step into the future with EcoCrypt, a platform unifying decentralized finance with real-world utility, where value flows freely. From gaming achievements to real-world assets, everything can be tokenized, fractional, and accessible in one trusted ecosystem. For gamers, investors, and global communities, EcoCrypt is breaking down barriers and democratizing finance. Join the revolution. Visit ecocryptusa.com today.
All right, welcome back. So appreciate having you with us today. We're talking to Sean Fitch for KLAUS Multiparking Systems. And Sean, so let me just kind of explain, and I want to jump into the deep part of the water where people get really nervous about this type of thing. Like for an example, electric cars, right? You still have a lot of people who are like, oh, I want to drive one of them things. They're going to blow up on you at the stop traffic light and all that kind of thing, and then you go to Orange County and you see like 50,000 of them everywhere you go on the road out there.
yeah.
So when we talk about a parking system like this, I'm a driver. I have this fob. I pull up. I use my fob and it takes my car and parks it wherever it parks it. How often do these break down and I get into a situation where I can't get my car because the machine is not working and there's issues? Let's address that right up front because I know that's a concern a lot of people have.
Sure, valid concern. I would say there's two ways to answer it. One is to view this similarly to the way you'd view an elevator in a building.
Okay.
It's mechanically very similar, maintenance and installed very similarly. It shares a lot of characteristics. So really think of it like you would an Otis
That's a
elevator.
good
Really,
point. I like that illustration. Yeah.
it helps you to see it's a common technology. There's really nothing crazy happening. It's something this environment's used to.
Right.
And as far as a user and dealing with, outages or lack of service, very infrequent for it to be a significant, infrequent to zero for a significant failure. What happens with some frequency, and I'll say, maybe 5% of the time that systems, let's say available. If 100% was 24 hours a day, less than 5% would maybe something in this realm would occur, and that would be a user error. And what I mean by that is in our most popular systems, Trenvario, which are also colloquialism is puzzle parkers. Our brand of that is a Trenvario. Trenvario is a puzzle
Hmm.
equal. In that world, which there's a lot of, we do have a user error that can occur, and this is probably representative of 95% of any issues, is a user did not tell the system they had left. So there's a gate when they exit, and like you mentioned, a key fob.
Hmm.
They are to use that key fob or other methodologies, whether it's a remote control or an app on their phone, but using some method to tell the system, I have exited. You may close and reset for the next user. It's just a safety feature that says your eyes have looked at the system and said, it's okay. There are times when us humans, go figure, don't follow rules, and we just leave without telling the system we're gone. And now the next user pays the price because the next user has to wait for somebody to reset that system, right? In many cases.
Hmm.
So simple things like that. Now, there is a learning curve, and that once that learning curve is kind of in the rearview mirror, that's less likely to happen.
Hmm.
So the frequency will drop, and we see it. The first year of use, there is some. Oh, I might be frozen. There, am I?
Yeah.
The first year of use, there's definitely some challenges,
Hmm.
but that usually flattens out, and as the people become more accustomed to it. So anyhow, wrapping it up, I would say that it's a very low percentage of time that that scenario could happen, but it definitely can. So you can't rule it out.
Okay. All right. No, I think the illustration of the elevator is perfect. We've all been in buildings where an elevator might not work or there might be an issue there. So, but I would assume Klaus has obviously serviced people in general areas that can get to a location pretty quickly to service any issues if they had to, or is most servicing taking place remotely?
The service is critical, and we do. We have boots on the ground everywhere. We have installations, and in our philosophy, even if we don't have a full team, we have at least project management or a KLAUS, essentially a KLAUS operations representative that can be in the market. So we're able to respond typically in our typical sale of a system. There is a service contract, which is again very parallel to the elevator industry. They also operate under annual biannual services contract agreements, and that's essentially how we operate is by establishing a certain cadence of system testing, review, and maintenance, which is very minor. And those individuals are the same individuals that would service in the case of a acute emergency. And in that service agreement, we'll usually state some sort of window or time for service in the event of emergency. So 1 hour response time or whatever it may be. In
Right.
most cases, 1 hour or less response time is pretty typical for us. There may be some installs out in the middle of the Rocky Mountains that may require longer, but
Okay. Gotcha. Gotcha. So let me look at this from a different lens. So let's say we're thinking about developers and mistakes that they might make or areas where they may not really see the value of doing something like this. So if I'm looking at building a building and I have to put this parking deck in, there's a lot of expense in all the concrete ramps and the emergency exits and the this and the that and the spacing. And it's just so much that goes into it from a parking deck perspective. What is the ratio of spaces to traditional parking decks that's out there in the marketplace?
I think there's still a huge number of projects, especially in more open land areas, that still will utilize traditional concrete deck parking.
Okay.
I can argue in every case that they shouldn't for so many financial benefits as well as, other values that could be brought to those situations in terms of making that space available for another use as opposed to just concrete deck parking. So it's still predominant, I would say, in most of the country. It's concrete, ramped parking is the standard. You only see the change in pockets where, like, let's say North Jersey or the Bay Area, have adopted in such number that, most projects, in those particular markets will at least examine mechanical parking as an option. Sometimes they'll still go traditional, but they definitely have it on their radar to evaluate every time. Whereas, let's say Columbus, Ohio, is probably not a thought in most developers' minds that are building, multifamily, projects. They're not
Right.
thinking, I should definitely check that mechanical box and see if it brings value to this project. They're probably not doing that. And I wish they would. I think
Hmm.
they'd find, not even for selfish reasons, I think that for their own benefit, they would find there's a large gain, financially speaking, to be had by alternating from traditional concrete to mechanical. And I mean that in costs of construction, space consumption I mentioned, but cost of construction is very real. I mean,
Well,
concrete
let's talk
deck
about
parking
that.
is not, yeah.
Give me an example. I mean, let's say for an example, right now, I'm going to do ramp parking and I can get 100 spaces in this particular locale.
Hmm. Hmm.
If I go to a multi-parking model, how many
Hmm.
more spaces might I be able to get? And do you have any idea as to how the cost difference might be affected?
Yeah, let's cut that into two pieces. I don't think it's necessarily always more parking you're gonna get. You may have a target of 100, and that's your number,
Hmm.
and that's good. Now, so the reality is that that traditional, structured ramp concrete parking is probably going to cost, rough order of magnitude 40 to 50,000 a space,
Hmm.
when you put, all of the factors together to create that space.
Right.
That's going to be a pretty good number. It varies, obviously,
Mhm.
market to market. But the reality is that consumption of space is, tremendous. So two things can happen. That could be excavation that now doesn't have to happen, right?
Okay.
So
Yep.
that's dollars back in your pocket, right? Instead of going maybe two or three levels subterranean, you only have to go one or
Hmm.
none,
Oh,
right? Maybe you
none.
could just put all that parking in the podium and just raise the podium height. So there are ways that, same parking count, same number of spaces, but I eliminate massive costs of other attributed, types of construction needs for traditional parking. They're gone now. So let's assume we're staying with the same number of spaces. That's the first benefit, is probably I'm going to not have to do a lot of things I was going to have to do with traditional parking. Then number two is, even in the space I'm going to utilize inside, let's say, the building's footprint, maybe at the podium, it's a podium construction, and we're going to put it on one level, and I'm going to put three levels of parking, let's say, on one level. Maybe I don't even need that whole footprint, right? Like I was going to need potentially with the traditional parking. I only need half of it. Maybe now I have some retail space on that level that I can now
Hmm.
create,
Hmm.
or an amenity space that's got some really cool features. It's a nice tall, level, because we increased that level for the parking. Now you've got this really nice tall podium. A lot of neat things can be done in there for different amenity spaces within the building. So I guess that, like, my answer was, it's really twofold. It's cheaper, and I'll quantify that in a minute. It's less expensive, but it also could potentially, create some other design features in a building that are, more exciting than the previous design. And
Okay.
and to wrap up costs, the reality is, we talked about puzzle parkers being, the kind of meaty middle of the world right now, and that is true.
Hmm.
If you wanted to put a number on it, call it mid 20s a space, mid 20,000s a space for a puzzle parker. So just to kind of be able to put some numbers in your head, that versus the 40 to 50 for traditional,
Okay.
there's some savings there. And I think you can further dive into the puzzle by saying there's other costs to create that box
Hmm.
of that it's going to go in. But I think that, most people find that that's not attributing a huge number to each space. If you wanted to give it another 5 grand a space and made the total comparison 30 to say 40, or 30 to 50,
Okay.
space to space raw costs, I still think you're saving, but it's those other costs that I think are the biggest, that add value as well.
Okay, okay, so that's good. So, reason I was asking that is because we're talking about urban environments is generally where you see this. If I'm developing in an urban environment and I'm making up numbers here, so don't hold me to this. But if I was going to do 100 spaces of ramp parking, and now I can do 200 with mechanical parking, let's say
Yeah.
for an example, I'm going to want to use those extra 100 spaces for, let's say, maybe the general public. for people that might want to park there as well. So now I'm able to, instead of charge just the people in the building for the 100 spaces that they're occupying, now I can pick up another 100 tenants, if you will, from the general public that are parking in the area that might have a place that they want to park while
Sure.
they're enjoying the city. So have you seen that kind of play out where developers are looking at it from that perspective as well?
I don't think it's been harnessed to any great degree yet,
Okay.
but I think that's a great way to position it too.
Hmm.
If you can, if you have the ability to, put in 50, 100 more spaces, your example, additional 100 spaces than you need, it's going to generate revenue.
Yeah.
And also a way it can generate revenue is selling those spaces to people who are car collectors or people who are
Yeah.
storing a car that live nearby but don't have a building with parking.
Very
There's
good
so many
point.
different ways that you could turn that parking into money.
Yeah. Yeah.
We've heard, this is crazy, but we've heard spaces selling in excess of, half a million, $1 million in different parts of New York City for different types of systems. But at the end of the day, it's selling a space for, $1 million.
Yeah, yeah. No, I mean that's 100% true. I mean, as I mentioned, I grew up in Manhattan, and literally I would park and walk a half a mile back to my my place because that's where the
Unbelievable.
parking was,
That's
right?
right.
There was no parking in my building. So, it could be a blizzard or anything else. Any other reason why you generally take a car, I would still
Yeah,
be out in the elements because I had to park. So,
of course.
and the parking was not cheap at all.
No,
So,
no,
very,
no.
very expensive.
So
Yeah,
can you imagine if your building or the building next door had an indoor
right.
area that you could safely, comfortably park your vehicle
Yeah.
and walk, a half a block
Hmm.
or just up a set of stairs?
Yeah,
You'd pay
exactly.
for that.
Yeah, without a doubt, without a doubt. Let me ask this. What is the biggest mechanical system that you guys can put in? Or can you duplex them? So for an example, if your biggest is 50 and I need 100, can I put two 50s together? Or how does something like that work? And have two, curb cuts, or how does all that
So
work?
there's, as I described earlier on, there's different types of mechanical systems. There's
Hmm.
fully, fully automated, and then there's partially automated, and then
Hmm.
there is the kind of, just basically a manual lifting device. There's really different answers to different questions here. But I will say that system size to answer that question is unlimited.
Okay.
It can be you can accommodate, thousands of spaces, down to, a handful of spaces. And that's because the systems can be designed to be broken into appropriate size pieces. So if
Hmm.
there was 500 spaces and an individual system size of 50 was the most appropriate, right? You just break it into groups of 50,
Okay.
and each one would have its own, essentially consider it like an operating system, yeah,
Hmm.
its own intelligence. So that's the way we would accommodate larger installs in most instances. If it's, basically the most simplistic, the mechanical stacker, those are usually valet attended. So those can be thousands of spaces. Valets are going to operate them. It really has no bearing. And then on the fully automated side, the kind of virtual valet, those are very much designed for what you're kind of alluding to, which is, users throughput. So if there's 1,000 spaces, you could have 100 users, let's say 10% of the system trying to access it at any given point in time. You need a lot of access points.
Yeah.
So you need multiple bays. And so that would essentially be multiple systems working together. So everything scales appropriately,
Hmm.
and it's all based on the needs of the project. And these are very, very seriously considered in that design phase. And then it's a matter of, configuring that system to check all the boxes for the project's needs. So it's pretty much math.
Yeah, yeah. No, that's a good point. And I asked that because I remember researching your systems, and I was like, man, they only cap out at this, but we really need a situation where I can do much more than that. And so that's a key point, that you basically can puzzle piece these together and make it work with multiple bays and everything else.
Exactly. Yep.
Yeah, yeah. Which makes sense also, because I know one question a person would have is, well, yeah, it might be like an elevator, but if there's one elevator and it breaks down, everybody's screwed. But if you
Yeah.
have multiple bays, then obviously you can kind of work around, those issues, from what I would understand.
Absolutely. And any system that's not designed with that principle in mind of, kind of peak throughput requirement, it's going to have problems. Even if it works 100% of the time, it's not making everybody happy 100% of the time. There's going to be a lot of people waiting. So the duration of the actual experience could be much longer than they'd probably have liked when you design a system that's inadequate for the number of spaces. So it's something we definitely think about every single day.
Yeah, yeah. Let's talk about something also that is really important in the news, and it deals with affordable housing. You know
Mhm.
what? We're actually right at our second break. Let's do that for our sponsor. We'll honor that. But what I want to talk about is from a developer standpoint,
Mhm.
being able to perhaps generate more units because of compressing the parking
Mm.
space and being able to create more value, thus reducing prices per unit. Let's get into that a little bit. But we'll be right back on the Mornings with Joel CRE podcast.
The Impact Air 99. We asked real people, try the Impact Air 99.
Breathable, light, but protective.
Feels very comfortable wearing it. It looks cooler.
It's almost surprising how much air you can get in.
Engineered with 6 layers of nanoscreen technology that blocks over 99% of viruses and bacteria while allowing you to breathe freely and speak clearly.
My glasses are not fogging up.
I could wear this all day.
Sage Data is your automated recruiting hub for any size organization. The concept is simple. If you have lists of prior applicants, Sage Data will clean, update, and convert those lists into digital resume profiles that are searchable. You can also post unlimited jobs in the system, and our AI will automatically search the database and bring back potential candidates for you. Head over to sagedata.io.
Thank you. And we're back here at the Mornings with Joel CRE podcast. We have Sean Fitch with KLAUS Multiparking. So, Sean, before we went to break, we were talking briefly about the value. Let's say, to give you an example, I'm a developer. I'm going to put up 200 units in this urban core, and, I'm going to do 100 parking spaces. But the city really wants affordable housing. And at that model, because of the cost of the parking and everything else, I'm not really able to provide that affordability that the market wants. And so my project is kind of getting stagnated because of that. How could this help me out? Can I possibly compress that parking space, add more units to my building without increasing the overall envelope of the building? And perhaps with these additional units, I can now bring down the overall cost of what I have to charge for rent. Is that something that might be possible? Or what issues do you see developers facing when they come to you for a solution as it relates to that?
Yeah, great area of questions,
Yeah.
Joel. I think that's, I've seen that concept play out a number of different ways. I'll give you one small example, and then I'll answer kind of some of the other questions related to it. But I saw a developer years ago in South Boston who had this is small scale, he had 6 units that he was trying to build in South Boston. And they required, the parking be in this very strange, and that's something to address. The land we get these days for new projects is very strange in shape. Nothing ever flows or works well. It's all kind of janky geometry. So this developer, was going to basically be stuck with this very expensive 6 unit. When we came in, we laid out a way for him to essentially get 12 to 16 spaces with no additional consumption of space in that footprint. And he was able to pivot and add another 6 units to that project. And he doubled the value of that project with such a simple question: how do I park this thing? And then we said, well, we can easily double the spaces. It's not a problem for us. That opened a door for him to really make some significant gains on a project he thought just was going to be pretty, mundane, and it delivered big for him on a small project. Now, we've seen that in scale too. We've seen projects that, had parking requirements that were very difficult to achieve and nearly impossible. And, let's say there was soil conditions, there was a ton of rock. There was no way for them to go subterranean and even do traditional parking. There's no space for them to put, some other structured parking. There was no other answer. And then, with this, we were able to, let's say create, in some cases, a podium height of 20 some odd feet, and put in 3 levels of parking, in that first drive, in that first curb cut, come into the building and put 3 levels of parking and more than over deliver spaces, beyond their expectations or their requirements, and make a project that, just would have been impossible possible. So I think that's where it delivers as well in regards to, enabling or creating, value, is that it can either take projects that exist and amplify them, or make projects that would kind of fall flat, or, basically path of least resistance for many of us, that would get dropped to the side, and because it's got that challenge, but we can
Yeah.
solve it, right? So now that's where it works. And just space consumption wise, just, understanding that it's essentially a third of the space required when you use, say, for like a puzzle parking system. So you require a third of the space that you would have traditional parking. So that's just big. I mean, it's,
Yeah.
as a principle of space consumption, that's a big thing. That's 60%, reduction is a big deal.
No, that's huge. That's huge. And you brought up a point also of maybe being able to convert that to some other type of amenity space. Maybe it's
Sure.
retail, maybe it's some other amenity for the building that would really create value. So I think that's a very, very good point. In your conversations as you travel the country, what do you think is the biggest thing that people are missing as it relates to this opportunity to do this type of parking? Because obviously you run across probably the same type of questions that come up over and over again that you're having to address, I'm assuming.
Yeah.
Yeah, what do you
Yeah.
think that is? What are people missing here?
Well, I think this is going to be relegated to everybody but the highest adoption areas, because those areas, they get it. They get
Okay.
it. So we'll have to rule those out. Well, you just put them aside. Put,
Okay.
let's say the Bay Area in California. Let's put North Jersey, New York, put them aside for a minute.
Hmm.
The rest of the country has not really taken the opportunity to understand what these systems can do to their projects,
Hmm.
and some of them are starting to experience the densification that we already know on the coast.
Hmm.
So places like Nashville, places like, mentioned Columbus, Ohio before, but oddly enough, Columbus is starting to feel that constraint of land, and
Hmm.
other similar metros are starting to feel some of those constraints and challenges. If they start now checking the box at every project to say, if I designed this with mechanical parking, what would it do for me? If they just check that box in the beginning of every project with their design team, I think they would find more often than not that it'll bring to the table tremendous value. But at least they could start integrating that as part of their thought process, like you
Sure.
would so many other systems in a building. There's a checklist that every developer is going through that says, what do I want to include? How do I want to make this work? What am I trying to make here? And I believe if they just started including it
Hmm.
and had it as part of their design evaluation, they would find a lot of the time it would be beneficial. And I feel like now they're not doing that. So a lot of our work is promoting just awareness, education, spending time with the architectural community and, development community to say, we're here, we deliver, these
Hmm.
types of, ROI results for users that are adopting this technology, and we just spread that word in hopes that all those other, markets will, start to take notice and, consider, let me evaluate it. Let me put pen to paper and see if this actually does everything that they promote it to be.
Yeah.
So yeah.
No, that's a good point. That's a good point. I appreciate that. So if I was to model this or I wanted to model this in a pro forma, what's the best way to do that? Do we reach out to you and your team? Is there a formula that I should use kind of as a baseline, $20, not $20, but 20,000 per space, or what should I kind of start to do to start modeling this in my pro forma?
Yeah, great question. I think that there's probably in the initial interactions, the first times that somebody has encountered or is interested in encountering mechanical parking, evaluating it, quantifying it for performa, they should come directly to us. And we all day long, when we're not promoting, we're essentially designing, mocking up designs, even if it's rough order of magnitude designs and numbers, it's enough usually to kind of get pretty close. And we do that, all day long as a service.
Mhm.
And that's great for getting a developer, up to speed, truly understanding, what all the systems are, what costs look like, what the nuances between a couple of different systems may be. Just getting them feeling comfortable. Coming to us first usually is a good way to do that.
Hmm.
And then, circling that back into their design team, is also, and I know many developers, employ, in some cases, multiple design teams, and we're happy to kind of, engage with their, respective design teams after that or in parallel, whatever they want. But I do encourage them to come to us first to learn the lessons from us directly and then impart what they know, to their design team and let their design team, kind of flesh it out as well. And we'll work with them and help them understand, the benefit to them. And like kind of closing thought on all that is design teams tend to be pretty wise. That's their job is to help their clients, right? And once we get an architect that really truly gets it and can see the value and understand where this works on their different projects, they tend to bring it to their clients and help their clients see that value proposition for us. And it's for them. I mean, we're just a tool. I mean, I use value prop, but it's not about KLAUS getting value. It's about what those tools do and provide value for others. And the designers do a great job. The ones that really fundamentally at their core understand their market and know that this is a way to access their market more successfully and provide better value and return for their clients. They start, doing kind of our marketing work for us, I guess, if you will.
Yeah. It's interesting. And I do have another question that just kind of came to
Yeah.
mind. And, if the answer to this is no, that's fine. But I'm just kind of curious. When COVID broke out, obviously
Yeah.
there was a big shift in what was being done and what could be done. There was a lot of talk of, even right now, office is kind of out of vogue in a lot of areas.
Yeah.
And there was a lot of talk about converting offices to multifamily, but it's cost prohibitive in many cases. Are there any examples where this type of parking has been retrofitted into existing structures, or is it always brand new ground up construction where you have this application applied?
I would say that that's, probably, the renovation or retrofitting market is almost non-existent.
Okay.
It's possible
Hmm.
if the conditions are right. The
Right.
biggest problem with, retrofitting is the clear height in a level, right?
Hmm.
So if you've already built the building, your clear height
It's set.
is established. It's
Yeah.
done.
Yeah.
And if it's only 9 foot 3 inches, I won't be able to do much for you in many cases. So I think that's the biggest challenge. We do have some interesting tools that are basically single level, we call them our park board. There are things that can create some intelligence and some automation in an existing environment that doesn't have really the height to go up,
Hmm.
but it makes the floor space more functional. So there is some opportunities out there, but renovating or existing structures is very very difficult. What I do see is where it does have potential is in some like industrial existing buildings, turning them into I've seen events, turning them into like event venues.
Hmm.
A lot of those industrial buildings have big clear heights in various parts of them, and you can in fact be successful in developing a stacked parking solution in those types of settings. But yeah, your average residential building, the floor heights aren't tall enough to really do anything too dramatic.
Yeah, no, I certainly get that. I was thinking of a situation where you might have an older building where they have ramp parking in a podium type structure, or maybe even a wrap type structure where you have units kind of wrapped around the parking ramp parking deck that's
Yeah.
there. And maybe that being, if it's a wrap situation, you could technically gut all of that interior parking and do a structure like this. It'd probably be cost prohibitive, but I'm just don't know if it's ever been done.
Yeah.
Or
I like
some
that idea.
situation like that is what I was thinking.
Yeah, yeah.
But
I think you hit the nail on the head with the cost prohibitive part.
yeah.
That's probably the reason that it's not been explored a lot because it would require a pretty large amount of, demo and kind of reconfiguring and
Right.
of a space that, is kind of programmed very one-dimensionally right now for
Mm.
that structured traditional parking.
Yeah.
And that's another thing too. Like that brings up a great point. these systems are future proof, right? So if I'm telling you to build a box, whatever the dimensions are, 23 feet tall by 80 feet long by 60 feet wide, whatever the dimensions are, I'm telling you to give me a box. And I'm going to come into that box and I'm going to give you a mechanical system. Basically, what I've done is I've given you a box that later can be a box again, right? If I want to remove that system, it's just nuts and bolts that put it all together. We can, in 30 years, 50 years, whatever the time frame is, now we're all being teleported. We're not driving anymore. We're particles
Yeah.
floating in space. You can just take that out. You can take it right out and you can use that space. It's a box. It's very functional. You can turn it into whatever you want at that later point. Whereas structured traditional parking, it is a one trick pony. It does that. And when you want to get rid of it, it is cost prohibitive. Whereas this is probably
Nuts and
relatively
bolts.
inexpensive. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
nuts and bolts. Send a steel erection crew in there to disassemble and take it all out and then scrap it for money.
Yeah, yeah. No, that is a huge, huge point. And the reason I bring that up is because one thing that we always look at in commercial real estate is what's the adaptability to other uses
Yeah,
over time, right?
for sure.
And that's like the conversation we were just talking about with the offices, right? What can I do with
Yeah,
this other than an office, right?
yeah,
It's not configured for multifamily housing unless you're going to have people in the interior that can't see nothing, right?
yeah,
And there's no windows or anything,
yeah.
right?
Not a lot of
So
people raising their hand for those units.
there you go. There you go. So the idea that I could have this box and as technology changes, I can morph it into whatever the future now presents, I think is huge
Yeah.
from that standpoint. So that's a very,
And,
very powerful point. I'm not stuck with this thing.
yeah, and Joel, I'll even add to that configurability for the future. Remember how we talked about this is a group of individual systems to create a large system, right? We
Right.
talked about making throughput and all that is important. Well, that is also important to disassembly. If I had parking, area parking on both sides, and maybe I have 50 spaces on each side, maybe I only want in the future, I only need 50. Well, I get rid of half and I turn that half of this space into something else.
Hmm.
Meanwhile, it doesn't impact the other 50 because I separated these systems. They're separate operating systems. So I can segment the parking environment and renovate or reuse parts of it. And that's possible because of the way we designed it in the beginning. So yeah, it is ultimately the most flexible parking solution now and in the future that you could have. And that's why I said it kind of like, tongue in cheek, but they should check that box on every architect and every developer that's developing, especially multifamily residential, should just check the box, evaluate it,
Yeah.
see how it looks, see what it does for you. And if you don't, you're just missing an opportunity. The cost to do that evaluation is negligible. So
Yeah. Yeah. No, very, very good point. Very good point. So I like this. This is one reason why I wanted to have this conversation because it's creating value out of where you often don't see value. If you look at a development project, you generally say, okay, I have to either cut construction costs, I have to get the seller to reduce his land price, I've got to increase rents. There's just so many levers you can pull
yeah,
in people's minds in order to get the numbers the way they need to be.
it's a
And
new
if
lever.
yeah, and if now I can say, okay, I can, reduce that cost or reconfigure that cost or create more revenue by having more parking spaces, it gives me another lever to pull in order to create value for the project. I think that's huge. And like I said, in some urban settings, being able to add affordability to a project that, before you couldn't put the affordability in there because there's just so many units. If
Yeah,
you're going to increase your unit count and blend that over a greater amount of units, you can really create some value. So there's a lot here. There's a lot here, and I think people are missing
I
the point.
agree.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I'm sure you do. I'm
I
selling
agree.
for you, right? No, but I think it's a
Awesome.
really good point. Yeah. So, all right. Well, as we wrap up, great conversation. What do you want the audience to know as we kind of close out here? What's that last thing you wanted to put in their minds as to why they should consider this type of system, or what do you want to share as we walk away today?
Yeah, real simple. It costs you nothing to consider it and
Mhm.
evaluate it. It costs you everything if you don't. It's that simple.
Okay. All right. Well, we'll clone or coin that statement and keep that close to heart. So we really appreciate that. But Sean, this has been great. For our audience out there, we want to thank you so much for being a part of the Mornings with Joel CRE podcast. We really appreciated having you here for this discussion. I hope you get a lot of value from it, and I hope you come back and listen to this podcast over and over again and really see the value in doing this. So, Sean, and for all of our visitors today, thank you so much. Have a great afternoon and hope you enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks, Joel.
Okay. All right. And
Yeah, we're now ended the live. All good, Joel.
we're clear?
Yep, I'm just
Okay.
playing the podcast invite.
Okay. All right. Fantastic. Yeah. So good stuff, man.
That was fun.
Good stuff. Yeah. Yeah. I'm glad we went
Hopefully,
ahead and did it. Yeah. We were still able to cover what we wanted to cover, which was the main thing.
I'm glad, and I hope my answers and thoughts were valuable to somebody.
No, no, I think you brought up two very because I've got two developments right now that I'm personally doing. One is well, they're both in Northern Virginia,
Okay.
right outside of DC, and you
Yeah.
kind of have that, transitional mindset, right?
Mhm.
Does this really work? Has anybody ever done this before? And, is this something brand new I've never heard of? And you kind of go through that whole thing,
Yeah. I
So
I understand. Yeah.
yeah, so the idea of being able to do something. Now we were working with a different group because I just wasn't familiar with you guys, but I definitely want to reprice the project. We were putting in 141 parking spaces in an area that has surface parking right now of about 30, the idea of being able to quadruple that,
Huge.
yeah, is absolutely huge. And the thing about it is because of the height
Yeah.
requirements in this particular area, we can't go any higher,
Yeah.
right?
Sure.
But by being able to give the parking and have the parking there and create so much volume, we can actually lease spaces to the city. We can actually rent spaces to the public
Huh.
that come to town, for tourism and things.
Sure.
I mean, it's a huge upside,
Yeah.
you know?
That is great. That's a
Yeah.
good
And we didn't
position.
want to give up on the idea, but we were like, man, how are we going to get this done? Let me ask you this, and you might know this. One of the issues that we ran into, and Jomar, we're not live, right? I just want to make
Yep,
sure.
yep.
Okay.
I already ended the live.
Okay. All right. Good. 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 And make sure you edit this part out. So,
Yep.
yeah. One of the issues that we came up with was mainly the institutional investors felt that we were trying to basically. Oh, where'd you go? Oh,
No,
okay.
there
There
we
you
go.
go.
Sorry.
Yeah.
That was me.
No,
Sorry.
no problem. The way we were looking at it is we were saying, okay, just view this as podium parking on the side, right?
Yeah.
So instead of
Yeah.
putting it on top, the building on top, we put it on the side because of the height requirements. And we're like, it's the same thing. It's just no different. And we're stacking in a lot more units. But the cost of the mechanical system was so much higher, we found, than just regular parking that the investors felt that it didn't make sense from that standpoint. We were basically showing how we can offset that by the additional units. But my question, this is what we finally decided to do. We said, well, look, let's just break it out and finance the parking separate, and then we
Hmm.
don't have this issue. So we'll do the multifamily because it's an urban core. We really don't have to have parking. The city doesn't require it. But we can still put this parking system in because they want us to replace the surface parking with some parking, and we're quadrupling that. So it's a win-win for everybody, right?
That is, yeah.
But we're looking at financing it separately. So my question
Okay.
was, how are people getting these parking systems financed, or are they always just kind of rolling them into the overall development?
Yeah. Most of the time, it's just being rolled into the development.
Okay.
Yeah. I've heard talk of a few times taking it and splitting it aside, but I don't think I've ever seen the final result of that. I'd say, every project I've, worked on in, 7 years has been rolled into the building,
Okay.
from a financing perspective. Yeah.
Yeah. Because see, the other thing is that, and I'll share this with you. We had an agreement with the city. They wanted first right of refusal on being able to buy the parking because this is a tourist area and they see the value, right? So they were like, well, we might want to buy that back from you once it's developed. So we're like, okay, cool. The problem is though, if I roll it all in together, I can't sell the parking and not sell
Ah,
the building unless I condo the parking, but it gets a little quirky at that point.
I
So I
see.
don't
You're
know. I
dealing,
figured
yeah.
I would run that by you, you know.
That's a unique matrix of decisions that you need to make.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think you do need to separate it out. That makes sense. I just don't know the right answer there as to what the tool or the mechanism is to do that most successfully. Unfortunately, I don't have experience in that, but I do see your point and why you'd want to separate it out. It's going to have inherent value to the city,
Yeah.
when
And it's
they're
its
going to
own
pay.
income generator.
Oh, it's going to be, yeah, it's going to be an income generation tool that is completely unique, but it's also going to satisfy the parking needs of the building. So it's
Right.
like
It's a
it's a
win-win.
win-win-win.
Yeah. Yeah. So, but the question is, how do I finance it? And
That's
I didn't know if you guys knew of, ABC company does it, maybe there's even a German bank or something that does, will finance something like this.
it's
It's just
something I need
more,
to think about for sure.
yeah.
I'll ask my colleagues and others, if anybody
Mhm.
else has, experienced that. Again, I've not. I've heard, in conversations talk of that, but it's never really culminated in anything. Projects either didn't go or went a different way.
Yeah.
So I don't know the right answer, but I'll
Okay.
inquire and see if anybody could help support the best direction on that. I'm sure
Yeah.
there is one.
No, I appreciate that. Even for this project, part of our investors, actually our largest non-institutional investor is from Australia.
Oh, okay.
And you mentioned Australia because they're more familiar, it seems like, with this model.
They are. Yeah,
Yeah.
they are. So we have a subsidiary. So like we're KM, KLAUS Multiparking USA
Right.
subsidiary of German company. They are
Mhm.
the Australian subsidiary, where
Right.
most everywhere else it's essentially a dealer network.
Okay.
So Klaus tends to set up subsidiaries in countries where it's a good market,
Mhm.
right? So Australia gets it and uses it, almost exclusively. Different types of mechanical parking, and the US is starting to become very similar. So
Yeah. Yeah. So maybe even, some Australian bank, but I don't know. Any
maybe, yeah.
information you could find out for me, I would really appreciate it because we've got a project that we've got delayed because of this issue with the parking. And if we
Yeah.
can solve that, we can get to work and it means money for you guys and everything else. So
Yeah. Hey, I'm all for that. I will, like I said, I'll inquire in our dealer network. So that spans global. That's Australia, that's
yeah.
European markets, Asian markets, Indian markets.
Okay.
So I'll see if anybody's got an answer.
Yeah, yeah. No, I appreciate that. Sean, what's a good phone number for you?
845
Okay.
629
Mm-hmm.
0684.
Okay. All right. And I guess let me get your email while I got you here.
Yeah,
Just make it easy.
sure. It's first name Sean, Sean, at multiparking.com.
Okay. Multiparking.com. Okay.
Yep, you
All
got it.
right. Sounds good. And I'll reach out to you and send you my info as well. But
Perfect.
yeah, no, I think this was good. I appreciate you coming on. And
My
once you
pleasure.
said you were the head of sales, I was like, well, if the head of sales can't tell the audience of what we're doing, then that company's in trouble.
I wasn't sure on the direction. I'm like, man, I don't want to seem disingenuous or not be the right guy.
Yeah.
But if you just want to, talk sales-based topics, I got you covered there.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that's what we were basically covering because I'm not looking to go into the mechanics of, where do you put this bolt and, I don't care about that stuff, right?
Good. No, you care about the important stuff.
Right, right, right. How does this make money and save money? So,
Yeah, exactly. And I'll tell you, like, anecdotally, and I never say it on like public conversation like that.
mm,
I'll say it to individuals, but for me, in my 26-year career in different sales roles across the country, in different markets, different products, this is the first space where I actually felt really good about what I sold and what it did for the people I sold it to.
yeah,
Like this
yeah.
is the first product where I know it actually had a net positive change on every project that I've sold it on. And
Wow.
there's just not a lot of stuff you can sell that does that. I mean, other stuff is kind of mundane. It's like, okay, you sold the facade.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. It kept the raining. Yeah. It's supposed to,
Yep, yep.
it didn't do anything else. This is the first time I've been involved in a system or product and industry that it actually can make things better. Like the guy in South Boston, no joke, this small time Irish guy developer in South Boston was puzzled, no pun intended, by how to make money on this project. 6 units, totally awkward. And the fact that like just by putting in a puzzle parking system, he doubled the units and it didn't like it worked perfectly. It just worked perfectly. He had the height he needed. He didn't have to go any taller. Everything worked out great and he doubled his money. I mean, every building he built after that had parking, mechanical parking in it. I'll tell you that for sure.
Yeah.
So,
Well, I mean, the other project that we have right now in Northern Virginia as well is 200 units, and because of the cost of construction and a lot of other factors, we actually had to table it for right now. But I want to take another look at it with this structured parking system because right now it's planned for just ramp parking. And if we can get the same amount of parking spaces in a tighter envelope, I can then bring in affordable housing investors where there's a lot of money out there for that. And I could put this project back on track.
well, that's
Also, with more units,
brilliant.
I can generate more revenue, which increases my margins. So,
Great.
yeah, it's a whole nother reason to take a look at this deal because of what this parking can do.
Well, that's great. I love to hear that. It's like, taking things that aren't shaken out well and being able to turn them into something that's viable is awesome. Like
Yeah,
that's what it's all about.
yeah, yeah. So I want to. Matter of fact, my business partner was going to be on this podcast with me. He's built over 14,000 units
Oh
over.
my
Yeah,
goodness.
yeah, yeah. Mainly in the Northeast. So yeah, we know about construction and all
Yeah.
of that. So yeah, but he's on a plane right now coming back from San Francisco of all places.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's interesting. But I want to pick up on the conversation and that's why I wanted him on the call. But like I said, he's
Okay.
on a plane. But anyway, let's definitely circle back up and you will be hearing from us and we'll see if we can find a way to make this thing work.
That's great. Yeah, looking forward to it, Joel. Thanks so much.
Yep.
Didn't know I was going to be doing this today, but I'm happy for it. So,
It's all good. It worked out well.
all right. Have
Yeah.
a good one.
Thank you.